Well, it looks like Quake 2 finally got itself a remastered version just like the first game did. Once again from Night Dive Studios. Now, this isn't typically just a remastered version of the original game, but it also comes with the original expansion packs along with a brand new one called Call of the Machine from Machine Games, and the Nintendo 64 version of Quake 2. Now, I need to remind you guys right now that it is not the same game as the original PC version. It's its own concept of levels, sound, and others. And there are some secrets as get too. Now, I've already talked about ports on the consoles like almost a year ago now, so I think it's a perfect timing to talk about this game. Now, for the game itself, the AI system has pretty much has improved, kind of, I would say like that, but the enemies are much more tougher than the original that I've played. There are also some brand new attacks I've seen from the enemies which can come right at you at unexpected time. So yeah, all your weapons and everything that you like are still there in the game. The only thing is that Call of the Machine, they have these bosses, they supposedly call bosses, but all they are is just reused enemies you've already faced, so if you guys know how to beat these enemies, then you have no problem fighting them. Also, I feel at times like I question if they even tested the expansion because at times there's swarms of enemies or sometimes lack of ammo, which is just strange to me. But it does play in a kind of like how similar the Quake 1 did, where it's episodic, so all you need to do is grab these CD discs and upload them on the inside the episode and whatever else the objectives tell you. It's the same thing over and over. You fight these bosses for whatever, and that's pretty much it. Now, I'm also going to say, too, that the Nintendo 64 version has pretty much improved upon. They actually recreated the intro that was shown in the Nintendo 64 version, which is cool. The gameplay is exactly the same. It's difficult, just like the Nintendo 64 version, which I will say again, the Nintendo 64 version is I have pretty much fun with, but I got one problem. The sensitivity is super sensitive. But the good news is that with this dual analog stuff, the game could be much better to play with now. Like, I know people are going to tell me we'll turn on the sensitivity. I turned it down all the way down, and I still have the controller super sensitive for some reason being. There's another thing I should mention about the Nintendo 64 version, is that this was the only Quake game on the consoles to let you customize your your bindings, meaning you can actually play the game with the joystick and look around with the C buttons, or play the game with whatever else you like to use, like maybe the D-pad or the joystick to move, look around, whatever else. But this is the version that does not like use what would you say, like make your own save points. You have to complete each level in one go, and they have 19 levels for you guys to complete. It may sound short, but depending on difficulty, you may have a hard time completing these levels. Sometimes you think some out of nowhere, like traps and more. And now, thanks to this remastered version, you can make your own save points at any time, which is pretty helpful. But like I said before, it has its own original level, so it's not like a copy and paste thing, kind of like what they did with Quake 64, but it was all like modified to run into the game. And the biggest difference is too, is the soundtrack. It was done by the same guy who did Doom 64 for Nintendo 64. Everything that I've played on the Quake 2 64, everything retains the same. The only downside that I had with the game was that one of the textures look dumb and weird, and that was in the ice level. Yeah, the walls don't look that great. But overall, the same experience is there. It's a lot harder, and, well, you'll see for yourself if you guys get the chance to play the game. Now, if you guys also want to play with each other the Quake 64 experience in terms of deathmatch, you can. You can actually do it within a certain amount of players, like maybe 16 players, but the problem is some of these maps just can be chaotic when it comes to more than like 8 players, mainly because the game was specifically made for 4 players. So I recommend that you guys either play the game like 4 to 6 players when it comes to deathmatch modes in the Quake 64 maps that they have in the game itself. Just thought it'd be helpful in that part. The only downside is that there's no PS1 version of the game on here. And I know some people will be like, well, it's probably just the same game, blah blah blah. Well, it's actually more than that. It's actually an abridged version of the original game. It's a lot shorter, but there are some exclusive enemies that the game had, so that was something new. And for 2, you can't excuse it because Quake 64 got its own release on the remaster, which is just a modified version of the original game. But anyway, back to the whole port thing. That the Nintendo 64 version was ported by, well, supposedly they say it's ported, but it's really a complete different game by Remastered Productions, and the PS1 version is from Hammerhead, which I own both versions physically. And the PS1 version happens to use a mouse if you really wanted to. Yeah, a PlayStation mouse. Ever heard of that one? I don't think anyone talks about that one, and I don't really see too much about it. I don't think that many games are supported with the thing, but Quake 2 is one of them. It was said, like, if you use the mouse and the controller at the same time, that's really how it works, somehow. I don't know how it does it, but there it is. I think difficulty-wise for both versions is that I find both of them equally easy, but the only problem is the final boss in the PS1 version is a lot harder. And yeah, it's harder. And the controls are weird too when it comes to the dual analog version. You move up and down with the left joystick, but you look left and right with it. The R stick, you look up and down, and you move left and right with it, which is weird. But there is a mod out there that actually fixes up the controls to be more modern. So I should just say that the PS1 version as well has the same music as its PC counterpart. The only thing is that they mix it up a little bit. So the soundtrack is from both the original and the expansion packs. Both of those games are not too crazy when it comes to being expensive. So if you guys want to experience both of those games yourself, you can. And now with the Quake 2 remaster here, you now can experience Quake from Nintendo 64. So this will give you guys the opportunity if you guys really want to do that. I should also mention too, like if you were to play on the original hardware, if you have the expansion pack, the graphics enhanced as well as the frame rate, from what I've heard. And I have the expansion pack, know what I'm talking about too. It auto-enables it too. There's also these long passwords for some reason. But if you guys have the Nintendo 64 memory card, you can actually use that to save it as well. Also, the passwords really depend on the game's difficulty. I should say too that both versions also has its own multiplayer. You know, speaking of multiplayer, the remastered version, if you guys have an Xbox Series X, you guys can play the game up to 8 players split screen. I'm not making this up. And I also find it funny too that Modern Vintage Gaming is being thanked for the port even though he has nothing to do with it, because last year he left Night Dive Studios for limited run games. So I just find that funny that they're all thanking him for that, considering he is a Quake master of porting stuff. But this one has nothing to do with it. You know, I hope there is going to be a Quake 3 port next, because that's another one I'm interested in. Yes, I am aware there is already a remastered version on the Xbox 360 with newer content, but I really want everyone to get around to playing that game online, by the way, because when I look into the servers, I can never find anyone to play with for some reason. Unless they're on PC version, that's a different story. But there are Dreamcast users still playing that game to this very day online, and they're regularly scheduled too. You know what I find weird about Quake 2 is that for some reason people call it a mediocre shooter because it's not Quake 1. Can I ask you guys something? Like, what are those people smoking? Because this is one of the best games I've ever even played. But there are some common complaints I've seen from people, and I get where they're coming from. But the remastered version seems to have actually improved on some of those things that people have complained about, like the chain gun, for example. Which you'll see what I mean by that. It's like there are so many levels in this game, just like Quake 1 Remastered did, which you have plenty of things to do in that one. But Quake 2 Nintendo 64 version is shorter, but it is sweet and it delivers it on. So that's a good thing about that one. The expansion pack's supposed to have newer weapons too, but Call of the Machine lacks any of that. They have the original ones, including the ones from the expansions, but that's pretty much it. You know, I was playing the game too, and for some reason, I shot a rocket through an enemy. It went right through him and didn't even hit him, so I hopefully, at this point on, there'll be a fix for the game, as I was playing on Nintendo Switch. Oh yeah, speaking of Switch, the game is crossplay as well. I heard it should be up to 16 players, and you guys can play in co-op with a whole bunch of other people. And this is a type of game that I think you guys will like when it comes to co-op play. There's going to be a ton of people in that game playing with you. You can also do some deathmatch and such. And speaking of deathmatch, I actually heard there's one new map you guys can even play on there as well. It doesn't matter if it's split screen or online. I think you guys have a fun time playing together these games. But I have one complaint I had with the game was that I was getting lost at times. I keep figuring out where am I supposed to go. But then I find out there's this compass that can help you track down where you're supposed to go. So if you guys ever get lost, use the compass. You know, I was playing the game too, so I noticed that you hold items. But when I played the console version, we didn't get anything like that. It could be the compatibilities or limitations of the controllers, which I don't blame, but still doesn't excuse anything. I think it's just because Quake 2 on Nintendo 64 had like an option whether you want to use the D-pad to move or anything else. So they had their own options there. The only thing I was really hoping is for add-on content for, like, you know, fan-made mods to be officially brought into Quake 2, but as reading the advertisement stuff, it may not be happening, but I really am hoping it will happen in the future. But if it can't happen, then that's sad. But overall, I think you guys will have a lot of fun playing this game, especially with friends.